going to tell a story about Zoom. Before the pandemic hit, I was familiar, many of you were, with probably some other video call platforms, Skype, FaceTime, maybe Messenger, Google Hangouts, but I actually didn't know anything about Zoom. Maybe you didn't either. And it just went nuts, right? It just took off, went crazy. We over at Stonewater, we name our boats, our new boats that we buy. We give them names. Numbers too, because then that's kind of easier to recognize them. So one of our new ones last year, we give them their number. They get the year that they were purchased, and then the first letter of their of what style they are. So this was a Mammoth boat, and so it was 20M. You can kind of see how that maybe would look like Zoom, right? It's also our most nimble boat. The style is it's highly maneuverable in the water. So because of that, it could zoom around 20M, and its christening was delayed by the pandemic. So we call that one Zoom for short. I mean, 20M is its, like that's how it is in the boat inventory, but Zoom is what we call it. Are we looking down there, Eric?
We've got 3, so yeah.
We'll give it just a couple more minutes here.
Phone numbers as well.
No.
Hey,
For people to get in.
Shane. Okay, there we go.
Yeah. Those that are in on the Zoom, maybe just give Eric a thumbs up or say, yes, I can hear you in the chat, just to make sure that we're being heard okay with the current volume of things.
And
That would be fantastic. I just wanted to say thank you to Rich back there for running sound. Appreciate it on this special occasion. Judy's welcome. All right. Well, so glad to have everybody here. Those of you in person, those that are joining digitally, fantastic to have you here. And Chico and Jennie, welcome back to Plain. So they were here with us in the first week of February. Had multiple meetings with multiple people, got to know them, and we're grateful to have them back. And as leadership, we're excited. As I said a few weeks ago, we're excited to put them forward as our final candidate in this search process that we've been in, and really grateful for their willingness to, at this point, answer the call. We don't want it to go without saying again that it is, of course, contingent on the congregational vote. And this is a part of that process for you guys to get to know Chico and Jennie a little bit this weekend. Essentially, Chico, to this point, has gone through 5 different interviews.
woo!
And so,
Yeah.
as elders, we're looking forward to you learning and gleaning some of the same information that we've already learned. And again, that's what this conversation is supposed to, that we hope will accomplish. So I'm going to pray over our time, and then I'll talk about a few more kind of just flow of our time, and we'll jump in. Okay. Father, we're grateful for Chico and Jennie, and God, we're grateful for you providing them to us through various means. Of course, it's kind of crazy how you lead and work in our lives, but we're thankful to have them here with us. God, we pray over this time that it can be honoring to you. We are grateful to be in this space together. We're grateful, God, for your great love for us. We're thankful for the community that we get to be a part of. And Lord, as we're a part of your kingdom, we just want to steward our part well here as we love each other, minister to one another, and to our community, God. We look forward to how you will use Chico and Jennie for your glory here with us. So, for your blessing on this time, thank you, God, for your goodness to us, and most of all, your grace on us. In your name, amen. All right. Well, I have a few questions that I'm going to lead off with, just to kind of get the ball rolling. You probably came with your questions, and that's good. I'm going to lead off with those. Once we kind of work through those few questions I have, then I'll open it up to the floor. So Mark Karnofsky is helping me out. He's got a mic. So if you have a question, you can raise your hand. Mark will come there. I realize we all have varying degrees of comfort with the microphone. I get that, but please speak into the microphone so it can be heard, so that the folks joining digitally can also hear it okay. We are recording this whole exchange as well for just to share with people that maybe couldn't either join here in person or via Zoom. So just raise your hand. Mark can come to you. Those folks on Zoom, if you have a question, put that in the chat feature, and Eric will share that with us, and we can keep moving ahead. We scheduled about 2 hours for this, but we'll see how it goes. I mean, we don't have to use the whole time, and we'll just kind of get a feel for how it's going as we get into it. All right. So to get us rolling here, what, guys, is your favorite hot drink?
Well, I just had it. It's a skinny vanilla latte. So, why? You have to do it. If you go to Starbucks and you order a drink, they ask your name and they put your name on the cup. And so then the barista at the end will say your name and your drink. So I get to hear, and I don't hear this very often, the word skinny in my name used in the same.
Oh, geez.
Shall we know? Skinny. My favorite drink, a hot drink, would most likely be coffee as well. Though I have switched to decaf in these last years, which is great. But since coffee quite sweet with all the good add-ins to it, so I'm very similar to that.
Okay, maybe this next one, this might not help the skinny cause, I don't know, but your favorite pizza topping, how about that? What's your favorite pizza topping?
Oh gosh, artichokes. Our newest thing is we enjoy making pizza at home. Chico's a huge pizza maker. So our newest thing is we really love the prosciutto and artichoke hearts, and then fresh arugula on top.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe some garlic aioli around the side. So
Nice.
that's kind of our favorite. I'm not a big meat person on my pizza, but I like all the different tastes, especially garlic.
Awesome. I guess you probably just make one pizza at home, right? So you like that as well. Yeah. Okay, Jay, tell me about a book you are currently reading or have recently read.
Well, my current ministry is with folks in recovery. So currently reading a book that just walks through from a pastor's perspective, how to help people that are in recovery. It's kind of self-published, and so that's what I'm currently.
I love fiction. So I love Civil War up to World War II. Historical fiction is kind of one of my favorites, but then I also like a lot of current authors. Some of you ladies may be able to identify with, there's like Kristen Hanna and stuff. So I read some of her new book. Her new book just came out. So I don't usually read as much as more as I listen because of my job that I have. So I have Audible. I'm one of their biggest fans. So a few books a week. So that's about what I'm at.
Awesome, good stuff. Okay, everybody keeping up, or moving kind of fast? Yeah. Okay. Could you guys tell us a little bit about your family? Just your background and what makes up your family.
Together, Jenny and I have 5 kids. They range from 34, 24, 23, 22, 22. So with twins at the end, there are 4 girls, 1 boy. The oldest is married and has 4 children. And the grandkids are 15, 13, 9, 10, almost 10, and then 3. So that is the blended family that we enjoy together.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit about how you guys met and some of your background.
There's many versions of this story. I'll tell the truth. Really what we did is we had some mutual friends that attended the church that we had attended, and they invited me up for dinner and invited Jenny over at kind of an add-on, and
As a last minute.
so that was the beginning. And then a couple weeks later, there was a knock at the door where I was living with someone, and there was a casserole at the door. And Jenny knew that 2 single guys living together in a homemade casserole was a pretty good deal. So that's kind of how it started. So, anything you want to add? That's good. So Jenny and I had a very slow courtship, 2.5 years before she proposed, and and so I think what was important to us is when you're blending a family that you do right and that you go slow. We have adult children, and so we wanted to make sure that they saw us modeling the best we could, what it meant to have a adult godly dating relationship, because they were doing the same thing just a few years behind us. And so we wanted to do that right. I lived on a ranch, a 140-acre ranch, and so there's about 120 people that live there full time. So every time Jenny came over, they saw that. It was important that we modeled for that community as well. What it meant to be together and to do right as adults. And so we worked hard at that, and that work was slow and steady, but I eventually got there and proposed to her at a Mexican restaurant. And she said yes. So.
Awesome. So you mentioned blended family and divorce as a part of your guys' story. Could you talk to us a little bit about how you've grown through your respective stories of divorce and maybe how, like what God has taught you in that process?
My story was I got saved when I was a college student. Got involved attending the church that I got saved at. 2 years later, I went on staff there in the singles group. I met a gal several years after that and got married. I was married for almost 20 years, just a few months short. But one day there were some events that happened in her home, and when those events were confronted, she let me know that she no longer wanted to be a pastor's wife and no longer wanted to specifically be with me. And she asked me to leave the home. She said it was for a couple days, and so I went to my friend's house where the casserole showed up many years later. But I went to my friend's house and said, I need to sleep on the couch for a couple days. So, unbeknownst to me, my wife would change the locks in the house, and that started a very painful process. That process, as I conveyed it to the board of elders at the time, what was going on, we gave me a leave of absence to kind of work on house and marriage and those things. And after that leave of absence, things were not any better, and the divorce papers were filed. The church said we can't have a senior pastor, despite the circumstances of the divorce. We can't have a senior pastor that's going through divorce. So they asked me to resign. And this was a church that I was 32 when they called me to be the church planting pastor. Started in a room a little smaller than this one with about 30 people in Bible study. The last 16 years, it was 1,400 adults and we owned 30 acres and we built a building on it. Away we went. But despite all of that ministry success, personally, obviously things were not going well, and so I did choose to step down. I resigned my position as the new pastor. They gave me a couple months severance, and so I took some time off. Did some pretty intensive counseling. Continued that for a series of months, and then I went to work for a group called Solutions for Change that did family homelessness, and then later, 2 years later, I would find myself at Greenwood Branch, where I served as the executive director, chaplain for drug and alcohol recovery at Christian Camp and Retreat Site. So that's a flyby for how my divorce happened, and about 2 years later, when Jennie would enter the picture and we started dating and kind of filled that part.
So my story is a bit different than Chico's. I was the typical girl married at 22 to a young man who was a couple years older than me. And, I look back now through lots of counseling, got to see that things probably didn't start off as well as they should have. And I just assumed that we would probably grow into these types of roles of a good marriage as we could, and it just never kind of happened. Through the 20 years, I was married 20 years as well. We have 3 children, and I was a stay-at-home mom part of the time, and then worked at a school district for special needs students, and then later on as special needs adults. So I could be home when the girls were home, took the kids to school, did the homework, we did the sports with our daughters and stuff. But there was some sobriety issues and some drug addiction issues throughout our marriage with my ex-husband. And towards the end of the marriage, there was infidelity on his part. He chose to leave the marriage. I didn't choose. I believed I made a promise and I was going to keep it and we can work through it. And he chose not to. So we applied for divorce, and I just went from there. Been divorced now 6 or so years. So you know, it's been a tough time. There's not a good relationship with my daughter and my daughters and my father, so I'm mostly their main parent. Chico has been wonderful stepping into the father role from the point of, hey, I've got a tire and it's showing me a weird number. What do I do?
Yeah.
And so we introduced him to what a tire gauge is. We had a daughter that just 3 days ago was an offender vendor. She called him first. What do I do? Here's the insurance info. Who do I call? And then I got a text from him. Hey, Ash, give Ash a call. She's been an offender vendor. So I'm very thankful that this man here has stepped into the role as a father for our daughters. We call them our children, not just my own, when we speak of them. And a lot of counseling. I truly believe in counseling. Hadn't been in it before. I had gone through the divorce. And it took me a year and a half of weekly sessions with a counselor. So it was tough. Again, I was married really young, and I spent my whole adult life in it.
I think an important comment to make is both Jennie and I would say this to you in public, and we would say it to you in private. We would still be in our marriages had given them the opportunity. That doesn't mean we don't love each other deeply. We're grateful to rediscover love. And I've been married 2.5 years now, but we would say that still, because that's what we believe the institution of marriage is. It's something that God ordained. It's something that once you make that commitment, you stay in it. To date, as a pastor, I've never counseled someone to get a divorce. I've counseled people to be safe and to be in a safe place, for sure, always. But I've never counseled someone to get a divorce, and I don't imagine I ever would, because that's just simply, I don't believe what the scriptures teach. But I do believe we live in a fallen earth, and in that fallen earth, all kinds of things happen. And the grace of God overwhelms them. And sometimes it just takes some time, and I needed some time to heal before I felt comfortable pursuing a pastorate again. I had a time frame on that. I had just knowing that my heart needed to heal before I would venture back in. My divorce didn't change my calling. It just changed the circumstances in which my calling could be expressed. And so a year or so ago, we started looking towards, felt like we had a couple of years under our belt as being a married couple together, and started looking towards pastoring again because I feel like that was my call. And so the divorce just changed how that was expressed for a few years. And certainly our journeys have done much to shape us and form us, and it's made our marriage today different because of what we've been into it and what we've learned. And so we're deeply committed to that thing called marriage. So it's an odd statement to have your wife make you say, if we were allowed to, we would have still been in those marriages, both of us. They were perfect, but we made commitments. So that's what we do.
Awesome. Thank you guys for your willingness and vulnerability to share. And yeah, just, I mean, I think we understand what you're saying, that it can be a both thing. You're thankful and grateful for what God is providing now, but it is okay to grieve what was lost. So yeah, thank you for sharing about that. He hedged into my last question that I had a little bit, so you guys can be thinking. We're just about ready to open things up. I'll go ahead and ask mine and see if maybe there's anything else to add to it. And that is just why playing, why now? You know, what brings you to us from Southern California? I haven't said that yet, and I don't know if you do. They're from San Diego area, San Diego area, where they're coming to us from. And so, yeah.
It is nice, but it is not perfect down there, but it has been home for both of us. Jenny and I have a few years difference. I might be a couple of years older. We actually went to the same high school, not at the same time. So we were born and raised in that area. My parents live in the same house that they purchased 57 years ago. And so they still live there. And so that's home. But God sometimes moves us, and he does it in strange ways and in ways that are effective for us as individuals. And in this case, God started to move in our hearts to want to get back into ministry. And so the short answer is why playing, why now? Well, the short answer is the call back. That's the short answer. The longer version of that answer would include, well, we like to say sometimes in ministry that the process clarifies the calling. Okay? Just like it did for you all as you entered the search process for a pastor. You have an idea of who you'd like to have be your pastor, but it's the process that clarifies the calling. Turns out that even if you're number 67 out of 67 applicants, you got a chance. Saying there's a chance. So to us, at this stage of our lives, we feel like we have the freedom from the Lord to pursue other adventures. And we feel like we have a good couple of years under our belts as a married couple to be able to do that together. So there became an openness to, okay, God, maybe what else do you want? To be honest, my first pass at re-entering the pastorate was locally. This is my home. We've renovated a house here. Just finished the backyard. I'd like to be away for a few summers. And to be honest, doors just were closed. And okay, God, what else do you want? So the search broadened a little bit, the types of positions broadened. And so I asked Jennie, would you help? Because I was working, so she was working not quite as much because the pandemic has changed many of their jobs. And so I showed her the websites where people typically post these kinds of jobs. And Jennie went to work and she found this job from Plain Community Church. She put it on the desk at the house and said, what about this one? And I said, okay, I'll look at it tonight. So I looked at it and I took that job description and said, my experience has been in large churches. And so the Lord needed to change some of my heart. Some of it would, to be honest, would be a bit about egos, like just because I've used you in this way in the past doesn't mean I have some things to teach you. about moving forward in the future and serving you, my people. So I said, okay, what is it that you want, and where would you want me to go? Well, I want you to look at that stack over there that your wife has made up for you. So the stack came back up and started looking, and so the time was running out of applying. I said, okay, I'll apply. And so that process of trying to just ask, well, what is it like? And I said, well, it's a little bit like dating. People ask questions, and you just get to know each other. The pandemic has made that, and mileage has made that more of a Zoom relationship till just a few weeks ago. But you just do your best, right, to get to know people, to be able to figure out the process clarifies the calling, both for the church and for us as a people. For me, just going through that process, where I started looking, I said, God, I think I have one more assignment. It doesn't mean I'm running low on energy in the tank. I have a lot of energy, but I don't like to move around places. It's not my style. So I was at my first church for 12 years, and then they sent me out to plant the church, and I was there for 16. And would have still, I had done my preaching calendars for the next 10 years. Kind of had folders set up, and was going to start doing, what do I want to do? And, obviously, some events on Earth changed that. And so that process just continued for us as we worked through that, and doors closed, and others. This one kept open. And just kept open. My first Zoom interview, Jennie was very patient in the back, and she would move for me to finish and then go to the back bedroom. And we have a German Shepherd, so she had to keep him locked up so he didn't bark at the mailman while I'm having a Zoom interview or something. And she said, "How'd it go?" And I said, they're just good people. And the Lord began to just say, that's what I'm talking about. What I want you to do is just get back to that. I call you good, and that's a shepherd of people. Forget about the size, forget about the place, just shepherd people. And I have a community that needs a shepherd. Are you willing to do that? And that's really the long introduction to how we got here. And the process clarifies the calling, and the Lord has to confirm that in the leadership part here, in the congregation's heart, and then He's done a lot to confirm that in our hearts too, despite the fact that there's snow on the ground. My wife loves that, Eric gave me a driving lesson last night.
How's the car?
Yeah, he said, go slow, don't brake, downshift, and everybody ends up in the ditch at some point. Okay. The car is still good. Right? There'd be some adjustments clearly in the move. But I think a lot of you have made that adjustment, and that's just part of my learning of what that would be to be a member of this community. And I believe that wholeheartedly, that's what a church should do. That word community before church means an awful lot. Clearly, we have a calling as a church, but we also have a calling to every community we're planted in. And the goal of the church is to figure that out. And through the dialogue with leadership, it just gave me a heartfelt passion to okay, I think together we could figure out, okay, what's the next season for Plain Community Church? And so that was attractive to where we were at, where the church was at. And, Shane called me. We were trying to get to our gates at the airport, and Shane called me, and I looked at Jennie with the big eyes, and you can see me all right with the big eyes and the mask. It was a little bit chaotic getting our bills, and Shane called, and I showed her the phone and Shane's name, and she goes, because Shane had told us, we were going on vacation since Shane had told, well, we'll call you maybe Sunday or so, let you know where we're at. It's great. I didn't call him, I thought for sure I should have been number 66. But I gave her the thumbs up, and we rushed off to catch our plane, and emailed Shane later and said, that my response to the phone wasn't reflective of what I felt in my heart with that phone call. It was just reflective of the chaos of the moment. But we're excited. We don't make any assumptions. We're excited about the process and hopefully we'll clarify the form.
Yeah, thank you. I was really hoping they'd be sitting at the gate when the call was made. But we were trying to call as soon as
I
possible.
jumped up and yelled bingo, and people looked at me funny.
Yeah, right.
Well, how about everybody out there, Zoom and here, maybe have a follow-up question, a little more specific details you'd like to hear, or something brand new, some other topic. What do you guys want to hear from both Chico and Jennie? All right, right up here, next to Byron.
Hello?
This question is for Jennie. Jennie, I have a little bit of experience in education, and I'm so excited that you're an educator and that you're a special needs teacher. And I'm wondering how you could see that experience in your role as a pastor spouse.
Thank you. That's a great question. Just to clarify, I was the special education aide, so an assistant. So I don't have the, the credentials in that sense to teach. But the one thing that I really did learn working with special needs of children and adults is patience and love. And I think those things are staples for being a pastor's wife. Patience for possibly maybe my husband not having a lot of time that he might have done before, because there's a lot of duties that aren't 8 to 5 being a pastor, right? And so just the patience of that learning this new role, and then just the love for the congregation. That was one thing that we were really looking for in a church is we're so excited to give love to the church and support and leadership and things that go along with it. But on the other hand, we just want to be loved too. And that's something that's really important to us. And I know there was some questions through the gals and stuff that I had met with the elders' wives and some of our interviews about a week and a half ago. And a lot of the questions I had were, how am I going to fit in? I'm coming from San Diego and I'm not bringing any friends with me, just one. And he's got a job and he's going to have some friends. I mean, I know Liz is going to adore him if this, goes this way. And so I think, what's going to happen to me? And so that's important for me, like you said, to join into the community and just volunteer my time or find a job in the community, something that I can just be a part of playing community. You all seem to fit so well together. I know there's probably some things, just the small communities is the way it goes, but you guys all seem, the feeling we get is you guys all genuinely love each other and support each other. And we've heard great stories of you guys coming together when someone needed some help or just support. And that's really attractive for us. So thank you again for letting me answer that, and also your guys' stories that you shared with us.
Yeah, thank you, Kate, for that question. I think it's true. Who else? All right, Jeff McPherson.
Jeff McPherson. Approximately, whoa.
The first thing is an affirmation. I know I'm not supposed to hold on.
No, not supposed
I'm a rule breaker.
No.
The first thing is an affirmation. It was a deal breaker with me that you've got a dog. We love animals, and so you're okay in our book. The second part is after you settle in, and you get to know the budget and know people, and you're comfortable, and that we'll give you about a week. Is the mission of recovery program still something in your heart that you will want to be involved in, or is that something that you've got other plans that will lead you?
Well, I think when you come to a new community, your first step is to learn. And you don't come in changing what to do your best to learn. There's a new season, there's a new pattern of life. And those are important parts of the community to learn. So that will be the first task is just to learn the people. In KP, if you're taking notes, if you would write this down, strawberry rhubarb.
Yeah.
So that's the best dessert to serve when Pastor comes over. But, did I say that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we really just want to learn. I think it's the task of the leadership of the church to collectively come together and say, well, one of the things I like to ask is, God uses churches of all sizes and blesses them differently. And in each local community of fellowship with people called the church, whatever the size it is, God has given them a certain amount of resources. And money is just a piece of that. He's given them the people and the talents and the abilities to serve Him. And it's the task of the church to figure out with this collective pool of talents and abilities, God, what do you call us to do? And so that's the process that most excites me. I don't come in with a preconceived idea of this, and this. I do understand, I think, some basics about how God grows churches and what He wants to do for a healthy church. And so whatever size it is, the church should be healthy. And so those are things I think we have to be committed to and look at. And in every process, I think the leadership here has commitments to do that and would recognize in certain places where maybe things aren't going even as they would like. That we need to get back to that. How do we do that? And so that's the plan we collectively have to come up and put together to do. So does that kind of answer your question? The only other thing I have to add is not only does love animals, my wife has a business as a professional dog walker before COVID hit. And so she had been running that business for a couple of years. So it's not uncommon that she would walk 10 dogs in a day for different clients. And so yeah, she's very much the dog walker, animal lover. The serpents are bad.
They're pretty easy to walk though.
Fur, not scales. Hey, thanks, Jeff. Yeah, let's go ahead with me.
Jeff and I have a blended family also, and all of our grandchildren are scattered up and down the West Coast. We have absolutely no desire to move to any of the cities where the grandchildren live. We moved up here and we're just comfortable with where they are and go visit them or whatever. How do you feel leaving your family and coming up here?
That's a great question about leaving our families. As Chico had mentioned earlier, his parents bought their house 57 years ago in the town. My parents did the same. They're one of the only house they've ever purchased. It's in the same town, just on the other side of it. 48 years ago, still live in the same home. So I grew up in that home. He grew up in his home. And so his parents are in their 80s. And my parents are just starting their retirement time. And with my mother, currently a survivor of breast cancer of 2 years. So our parents have some possible health issues in the future, which that's a big discussion for us. We thought about that, and we talked to our parents, and we said, this is an opportunity for us. What do you guys think? One of the dearest things I think I've heard my husband say is after we had gotten the phone call from Shane and we're on the plane, we both looked at each other and we were just, just some of that stress leaving our bodies. And then I said to him, what do you think? And he says, I think I need to talk to my mom. I think I need to hear it from my mom that it would be okay to go. And that was very touching. And so that could be that's a great description of how we feel about our parents. We are close to both of our sets of parents, but our parents are also very rooted in their communities. Again, they've lived in the same house for many, many years, and they love the California sunshine lifestyle and things like that. When it comes to our children, we just heard the other week that our daughter and son-in-law and grandkids have just been going to be relocating to San Francisco in June. Our son-in-law and taken a job at a firm there. We have one daughter that lives just south of Portland. A son that lives in Arizona, and then our other two daughters are in San Diego. And I don't know if they're going to leave San Diego. They sure do love that lifestyle there. So for us, with our children kind of flown, we felt that it was good time for us to kind of explore what options there are for Chico ministry. And if there's something that our parents need, that we did look, there are places up here that would be able to suffice for them if they need some extra care, or very well they could live with us down the road. We hadn't ruled anything out. So yeah, that was a good question about what do we do with this family that's all in California. Maybe they'll move with us at some point. But we're open to that. So just let God guide us.
There's just one at home of all that, of the 5 kids, and that's Morgan, the youngest of the twins. And so she will have some options. What we've talked about, and she's the one that is a graduate of George Fox, trained to be, wants to be a youth pastor, work with middle schoolers. And so it's just kind of hard for her right now, so to get a job in that field. But we've had really very rich discussions with adult children. They come very few, but they're there. And so we have them in one of the discussions that God calls us, He also calls you. You don't necessarily have to come with us, but we have told her the parsonage has a room for you. If that's what you want to do. Sure comment was, you always said I would have a room with you. And we said, we didn't mean when you were 35. Maybe you should clarify. But and we did tell her the parsonage is big and you can come if you want to. But she also has grandparents that have extra rooms down there where she has her friendship group. So she's the one that really would be displaced by this event, really. And the others are already rooted in a home. But I think it's important that she is also the one that's most spiritually minded and recognizes that God calls us as a couple to serve somewhere. He also calls her. It just may not be to come up to claim, but he also has a calling for her in that he hasn't forgotten her. And so she's wrestling with that a little bit.
Great questions. Yeah, we're gonna go back first.
I just had a follow-up kind of about that.
Okay, Bob's got a follow-up. Mark, you can stay right there. Hit it, Bob, and I'll repeat it.
So I think behind some of that question was that our former pastor left as a family. And now we're seeing the former pastor is leaving where he is to help with family in Arizona. How do you see your role if there are circumstances of your parents or kids needing somewhere else?
Yeah, just gonna repeat that real quick for the recording. So just because of the history of some of the pastors that we have had needing to take care of family and some concerns there, Bob's question was, how do Chico and Jennie see that maybe playing out practically to take care of family?
Yeah, when I filled out my application and asked for some references, and I put the man that led me to the Lord, he hired me on my first ministry job, and he's my mentor still today. He's not retired. The guy that I lived with as soon as I was asked to leave the home, and he's the best man at my wedding, and my optometrist, who was my life group leader, and who got a 48-hour license and actually married us. And so those were our 3 references. I really didn't know. I was still in the process, but we submitted the paperwork and there was some time, and they sorted through that. And until I got a call from one of my references that said, "Hey, did you apply for a job up in Washington?" And I said, "Yeah, I did. A few weeks ago, I hadn't heard much, so I didn't know where that process was at." And so he said, "Well, they just called." I said, "Well, how'd it go?" Because no one called me, but they called you. And so all 3 of them, within about a 48-hour period, called, and all 3 of them said the same thing: if you go there, you need to be committed to stay. Everybody understands the call of God, but barring any set of circumstances that everybody can agree on, yeah, God's doing this. But if you go there, you need to stay. That's just what this community needs. Because of the past, and because of some things that happened, and I said, okay, understand. So that was our first introduction to the formal process of candidating is, all right, well, if you call us there, it really has to be. And that had already been something that I know that I'm much more Barnabas than Paul, personality wise. I'm much more tortoise than hare in the speed at which I do things. But I know the tortoise gets to the end line often long before the hare gets there. So there's intentionality to the way that I enjoy working, but there's a steadiness to it. And that's just how God has wired me. That's why I work best. And that takes some time sometimes to get ingrained. And so God has used me best when I stayed put. So 12 years in my first year, 16 in my second. My change in the other two jobs that have been shorter are related to circumstances that I couldn't control. And there's good ministry at the ranch. It's life and death ministry and drug and alcohol recovery. And you see people get saved in a literal way from dying. And that's exciting to be part of. So I'd love to continue somehow. I don't know exactly how that will be expressed in this community, but all of those things add up for me to say, these next few days or a week or so, the vote goes the way we hope, then it is our full intention to spend the last, what I would call season of ministry that I got. I think that that's the whole 10 or 15 years or so, but because I know that would be best for us. And I think that's also what the community wants and is looking for. So God can interrupt that process at any point in time. Usually when God interrupts it, both sides can see it. Oh yeah, we think God is doing this. And so, but barring that, I don't, that's why I needed to ask my mom, not because my mom makes every decision for me.
Yeah, that's right. Clarification.
As my wife was saying, I'm like, I wonder how that's coming across. But it was more of, we do want to say to them, we're leaving. And we'd like your blessing. But that's important. That's important. We both have brothers that live in our parents' homes. So there's a support factor there. Her brother has a job that requires him to travel a lot. He has a daughter, so Jennie's mom is involved in raising these. My brother actually struggles a bit with addiction. So he's lived with my parents. He has a job and works, but he's lived with my parents for some time to help him through that process. So there's that additional level of support in that. So my best answer is I'm not planning on going if the call is right. And I know me, and I know it would be best if I stay in the and work through the messy middle of life with people and discover together what God would want us to do and just obey whatever He asks us.
Great, yeah. Talk there by Mark.
So you mentioned at your former church that you have up to 10 years of sermons planned. Are you the type of pastor that follows like a series, a topical series, or books of the Bible, and so it's fairly predictable as far as what the next Sunday is going to look like, or more kind of, oh, the Spirit led me to do this today, so I'm scrapping that for today.
Trying to think of something great. Come to service tomorrow at 10:30 and find out. I like to play. So again, the Spirit of God can do whatever the Spirit of God wants to do with God. And so, well, I don't think I've ever said that. In fact, I've corrected younger pastors that served with me and said, well, I just felt the Spirit of God moving. And so I spoke for 45 minutes instead of 30. And I said, but the children's ministry volunteers didn't feel the Spirit of God moving. They're the ones that called me. So, I think there's reasons why we, God can do whatever He wants to do in the middle. But I like to plan ahead. I like to generally have a feel for the year. That doesn't mean we don't change. That change would come with meeting with staff and meeting with elders. If, like sometimes in California, we've had some pretty significant fires break out. And our church was an evacuation site at one point. Well, that changed everything. It wouldn't be wise to continue the sermon series as we had planned. So we did change. It would say the Spirit of God or circumstances, but it seemed good to do that. So no, I generally like to plan it out. I generally like to have a feel for the year, because you also recognize there's certain times of year that people like to come to church. And was that being called a bully? I don't know. There's certain times of year you want to capitalize on that, you know, the Christmas, Easter, Mother's Day. So you want to actually plan sermon series around those times to leverage when guests are here and when to give them a feel to want to come back. And so try to plan sermon series around that. So my preference is I'd love to just pick a book and go, because that's the easiest, right? You just take the next passage. But there's certain topics that don't lend themselves that way. And so what if we just really sense collectively as leadership that, wow, there's just a lot of hurting marriages in our community. So we might do a short topical series on marriage to address some of the issues in the community that we feel like are happening in our own church, in our community, we can invite people to. So things like that. Despite my preference to just take a book of the Bible and go verse by verse, I don't know, most people don't realize this. There's no single sermon in the Bible that's actually preached that way. Every sermon in the Bible is topical. And so it's because they were dealing with issues of the day. Every letter that Paul wrote is topical, right? He's dealing with issues of the day. And so that just feeds into how we choose sermons. But I like to have an ebb and a flow and a plan for the year. That plan can be altered. I like to make sure people know about that plan so that they have input into that plan. So I like to say, first and foremost, this is what God is teaching me, and let me just share that with you. Because I think the sermon, first and foremost, is for me, not for you. It's for me. It's God teaching me something. My job then is just to translate that in a way that you might remember it at dinner later that night. So that's what a sermon is. So that's my approach.
Excellent, great question. Just a minute, Cindy. Anybody asking a question on our digital platform? Negative. All right, Cindy Cram.
All right, this question is for both of you, really, but just share with us how God captured your heart individually. How did God just really get hold of you?
So I did not grow up in a Christian home. I grew up in a loving home. My dad was in the military, the Navy there. My mom fled her home in New Mexico because there was a ton of alcoholism. And when she was 18, she got up and came out to California. And my parents were introduced by some friends, and they were at me and had a brother. So we grew up in that home. They took us to church when we were little, but that didn't stick. We'd rather have donuts and cartoons rather than church. And so that didn't, I can remember that as a little kid. So I can remember going to church as a kid. Both my parents had grown up in historic Christian homes. So they went to church when they were little. So that was the season when they became parents to do that. God got a hold of me when I was kind of coming out of high school and in college. I didn't know how to treat people well. I was a selfish person. And that selfishness led into promiscuity, not treating young ladies appropriately. That led into one of them getting pregnant. And so we did what we determined together, her and I, and we had an abortion. And that was the end of the story, or so I thought. I drove her down, I paid for the procedure, heard the machine go on, drove her home, and that was it. And I went to college because I wanted to play baseball. And I was pretty good. And she didn't want to be a mom, and so we agreed. And But life started to change for me, as you can imagine, right? That wasn't just a decision of convenience. That was a life-changing moment. I would not have recognized it to be sin back then, but I would soon recognize it to be just that. And so about 8 months to 9 months later, I find myself in a grocery store, just buying some snacks, and a baby started to cry. And I ran out of that store, and I knew something was wrong. I didn't know what, and I didn't know how to fix it. And so that started a pursuit for me. So I took a religious class in college. Well, no, it's not that chanting. That's not going to work. It's even a Christian speaker came in, and it really took this girl who junior college is the same as middle school. But people are just bigger and have more hormones. And so because here we skiers, but back in San Diego, it's, surfers and skaters sit on one wall, the jocks sit on another wall. Those that are more hippie-ish and lifestyle sit on one. It's all the same. And so we're all on our walls between classes, and this girl walks by, and she knew everything. And she went back and forth, and she hugs and smiles, and her name was Bernadette Pasquale. And I literally had one of those moments where I said, that girl has something in her life there. Because I knew I was wrestling now with this decision to abort a fetus, and I didn't know what to do with the burden that I was feeling. Because you know that burden was called sin. I didn't have a place for it. And I couldn't talk to my parents about it. And so I got to know Bernadette Pasquale. And you know what Bernadette Pasquale did? Invited me to church. And she introduced me to her college pastor. And he looked me in the eye and said, how's it going? And I said, well, it's not going very well. And so he said, how about I come out to campus and I'll buy you lunch? And I said, okay. And so he sat down with me and he said, started to teach me from the scriptures. And I said, well, that's not for me. I said, the Bible's a crutch for people who read it. And he said, okay, that's probably true, actually. And he looked at me in the eye and said, have you ever read it? And I said, not really. And he goes, how can you reject it if you never read it? That made some sense. And he said, do you have one? And I said, no. And so he said, how about next week I buy lunch and I'll bring you a Bible? And I said, college student free lunch. Okay. So I showed up next week and he bought lunch and gave me a Bible. And I said, where do I start? And he said, start here, the Gospel of John. And you just read as much as you want. And you write down any question you have, and I'll buy lunch next week. I said, college students will be free lunch. And okay. And sure enough, I read a few pages and wrote down some questions, and he bought lunch. About 6 weeks into that, I shared with him what had happened. And he described it as sin, and the weight that I felt was a burden of sin. And he said that there's a solution for it. And he began to walk me through salvation, and I said, wow. I said, I've tried socially using drugs, didn't make me any happier. I tried drinking, didn't make me any happier. I didn't have the addiction that my brother has. But we just tried those things as young people do sometimes. I was an assistant manager of a restaurant, had more money than all my friends, and that didn't solve my life problems. And obviously promiscuity didn't do it either, just got me in trouble. And so I said to him, I don't know what else I'm going to try. And he said, why don't we try Jesus? And so I prayed. My prayer of salvation is not the one that's historically written on any For Spiritual Laws booklet. My prayer of salvation was a simple one. It says, Jesus, if you're real, here's my life. Because I had gotten to the end of that road, the guilt that I had felt from the decisions that I had made, the way that I treated people. And I knew that if he wasn't real, it was a low risk commitment, right? If it wasn't real, it's not real, and we just move on. But if he is real, I need to come. And so that's how God got a hold of my life. And then I just started attending church, and got into a discipleship group as a college student. 2 years later, they asked me to be an intern. And then from there, I just realized I just want to serve the Lord. I knew what it was like to be lost, and I want to spend the rest of my life helping lost people with that. And so that is a brief overview of how God got a hold of my heart and how I got into ministry. And so that passion to help lost people get found really hasn't changed.
So I don't have a great story like that, right? But I was saved as a young girl in youth church. Actually, it was happened to be the same church he was saved in many years later. I was a big community church in the next town over. But your question is when did God really get a hold of my heart? And sometimes I see that a little differently, because when I was a young girl, taken to church and just been growing up in the church, I thought he always had my heart. And I think he did, but I think the part where I really felt closest to God is when I had the worst time in my life, and that was through the divorce. And I think I felt the closest to God. I was in the most pain I'd ever been in my life, and I prayed never again. So when you say God getting a hold of my heart, that really resonates with me. Is that time that I struggled with God, and many times I was angry with God. I can admit that, and I look back, and I am so thankful to God for that journey. And it was a long journey for my heart, and my heart is still healing, like Chico has mentioned. Both of our hearts are still healing through that. So I think that's kind of when God really got a hold of my heart. Was going through that hard time, and just got through it through His grace and forgiveness.
Excellent. Thank you, Cindy. All right, we got a question over Zoom.
A Zoom question. Technology. Wow, this is awesome. So this is a question from Craig Hinman, and it's kind of first part and then the question. This is a community church made up of a diverse spiritual background or backgrounds and denominations. Many people retired from vocational work, many in the service industry, down all the way into the youth in the area. How might you see reaching across these denominational backgrounds and intergenerational positions in life to be a missional church into our community and amongst each other? Do you want me to repeat the question?
Yes. Thank you. Very thoughtful question. My original understanding of God's calling in my life was to be a missionary. So I come from a Hispanic family. My mom's side of the family is Hispanic. Chico means little boy. It's not my legal name, but that's just what people have always called me. And so my original understanding of God's call was, man, I just want to share my faith with my family, who some of them don't speak English. So I changed my major to Spanish in college, and then later when I entered seminary, I studied the discipline of missiology, which is the idea of understanding the Bible, understanding how God has worked through history, and then understanding how to present those truths to people in their way so they can understand it for themselves. That obviously includes language, how people make decisions, those kinds of things. And God has a sense of humor, and He doesn't waste anything. So when I became a pastor, some of those things may seem wasted, but God has always used them. And so He's given me eyeballs to look into a community and not see all the same color or all the same profession. Or He's given me the eyeballs and the heart to see, well, wait a minute, this piece of the community has this need, and this piece of the community has this need. Could be related to age, it could be related to profession, it could be related to brokenness. How do we as a church then not just preach the gospel at them, but live the gospel with them? How do we enter into their community? Because remember, the first thing Jesus did was enter our world. He didn't preach us, right? He's the incarnate Son of God. He became dependent and lived among us. The Bible says He pitched His tent or dwelt among us. And so that's what a community church learns to do, dwells with the people and lives out the gospel truths before they preach at them. So it would be wrong of me to rattle off, 14 ideas because I don't have that many right now. And that's the part of learning and being part of the community, to be honest. And but my guess is, as we get on that journey together, you all have a head start on, well, these are the needs of our community. And then collectively, we put our hearts and our heads together. Well, all right, well, what are the resources God has given us to meet those needs and reach those people? I know this about adults who come into a community is adults typically make decisions when their life is in tension, when their life is in stress. When life is perfect, they don't make life-changing decisions, right? Because they don't have a need or perceived need. For me, that was that abortion, right? That created a need in my life that I needed to solve. And so those are the moments we look at people's life, those life-changing tensions, and all of a sudden, we can't be a church, if you call me, we can't be a church that just pounces on that moment with that. No. We need to do the love work ahead of time, the groundwork ahead of time, so that the people in our community know, no matter what my need, that church is going to love me, care for me, accept me, help me. And so those are the kind of things I would think through. I don't have a 7-step answer to how to be a missional church for Plain just yet. I would look to discover that with the leadership of the church. Addressing the denominational, varied spiritual background part of that question, I would answer it this way. I think every church should have a very core set of beliefs that they will go to the cross for. I believe the Bible gives us those set of beliefs. That set of beliefs should be the smallest possible. Because remember, we're going to the cross for those. Who's Jesus? How does one get saved? Those are things that we must agree upon. But there's a ton of stuff in the Bible that we can have great debate upon, as long as we do that with our hand open, because they're not central truths in the Bible, they're not core truths in the Bible, they are truths in the Bible. And they're things that we should dive into and try to understand. I believe they're truths that we should wrestle with. And at the end of the day, do they help us get to heaven or not? Because if they don't, then those are truths that we can wrestle with. We can sometimes agree to disagree on, and then we can take communion together. We should be able to handle those discussions that way. So I typically draw a small circle and say, those are the things we must agree upon. Then there's a larger circle of truths that the Bible does have some teaching on, that we can have some debates. Maybe the church does it differently in the past, and your church did child dedications one way, and Plain Community Church does them another way. Well, actually, there's no chapter and verse on that one. It's okay. We're just doing it, the best way we know how possible to be a community church. And so we can have some strong feelings on that, but I generally like to use the circle models and say, not every truth is in the Bible. Well, that's shocking. 2 + 2 is 6. Someone struggled.
Yeah.
2 + 2 is 4. It's not in the Bible, but we know that to be true. Not every truth is in the Bible. So there's lots of things that aren't in the Bible that we can debate upon. And there's even spiritual truths in the Bible that if God wanted them to be crystal clear and every church to do them the same, he probably would have said it that way. But instead, he left it fuzzy. Should you have deacons? Should you have elders? How should you be organized as a church? There's no one way that that's illustrated in the Bible. They're talked about in many different ways. Why are there so many different kinds of churches? Because there's different ways. The difficulty is when we demand that our way is the best way, and our way excludes you from being part of it. Like, well, wait a minute. If that was supposed to be so clear, God would have said, and there would be a chapter and a verse in the Bible we could open to and see it says right here. So my experience on the varied spiritual beliefs is there's usually good people on both sides of the aisle. The problems come in is when we demand that our side of the aisle be the only way. And there's very few verses in the Bible where I think God demands that there's just one way. And then those verses we must hold true. And if that means someone has to leave the church, this is the core of what we believe is the church. But those are very small. And that's usually where the church gets it wrong. They take those secondary beliefs and they jam them into that core, and then feelings get hurt really easy, relationships get broken. And really, it's just about us trying to have our way of the right. Hope that answers the question. Sufficiently.
So far, so good.
So far, so good.
Well, yeah, thank you, Craig, for that question. Anybody else? We still have time. No? Who's shy?
Mark Williams.
Yeah.
Jennie, Chico, I couldn't help but notice, the book that you're reading right now, the one about addiction and recovery and that. And so, of course, you know, violence in my background and abuse and all of that. I know you said that you Jeff asked the question on the services you were going to attend to, but I thought that just find out why you have, you obviously been serving that way for quite a long time. And coming, Brian and I also kind of running here, but Brian and I also involved as a director, talking to Jeff and some other people who celebrate the country and recognizing that drug addiction and addiction don't just rest, outside the church, but they are in the church as well. So I guess I just want to you read the book that's on the impact in the heart right now. And I just like to kind of find out a little bit about it. And it's important, I guess, to ask because, you know the parent for me.
Sure. There's a couple things that come to mind. One, reaching non-believers is messy. Sometimes churches don't want to do it because it messes up how we want to do church, right? Because they sit in our seats, don't they know? Don't they know that's where Bob sits? Is this where Bob always sits?
No.
Actually.
Sure.
So, just for illustrative purposes, right? And so those unchurched folks, they sit in their seats. They don't dress right. They don't know when to stand up. They don't know when to sit down. They don't know when to fight. They don't know our cheers. They don't know our something. They mess up our comfortableness in church. And I'm a little bit off that way. But I think we ought to be inviting so many people to church who are uncomfortable every day. Because if God didn't have a purpose for us as a church here on earth, he'd take us home. We're going to sing better there. We're going to worship better there. So why does he still have us here? He has some things for us to learn and some what? People for us to reach. So part of the answer is that. If you call me, that I'll try to mess up church. But please understand what I mean by that. Not the way we do it, but who we bring. Because I know what it's like to be in the back of the room and go, well, I know I can't raise my hand because it's church, But to ask somebody, why is Daniel in the lion's den? Why? I didn't know the Bible as a college student. I don't know why Daniel is alive. Why is he in there? There's somebody, please. That does not seem to be the place you want to be. Can we be a church that allows people to ask that question? To not know in their Bible, where is that one? To open the table of contents. To find the page number and to be okay with that. And that's when you invite the community members to church, it messes up church then. But that's okay. That's why we're here in this community, to reach this community. So that's part of the answer. The second part of the answer is when I left the church, when I was asked to leave because of the divorce, Um, None of the elders called. Not all. And I had a small group of friends that called. And for the first time in my life, as a pastor, you're kind of that one that people seek out and come to. For the first time in my life, I felt on the outside. Once I got through some of that pain, I said, I never want to lose somebody on the outside. I didn't. Now, the reasons I felt on the outside may be different than the reasons somebody else feels like on the outside. But I said, I'm never going to leave somebody on the outside. So when the opportunity to serve folks with addiction, who are they in our society? They're folks on where? On the outside. And maybe they've earned it. Okay? Maybe they've made those choices and we can easily argue for that. Maybe that's right. But they still deserve a chance to know Jesus. And they still deserve the opportunity to hear about him. And that's what we do at Freedom Branch. And so, whether it's a formal program or not, we just need to be the kind of people that doesn't leave people on the outside anymore. Whatever the reason is, we find ways to reach them with the gospel of Jesus Christ. And so, again, I don't have 14 different ways that I'm coming to play and say, we should do this, and this. That's not what you get from me. You'll get a very thought-provoking, wrestling process of what is God calling us to do as a church. If these are real needs that we want to reach, which ones do we prioritize? Because we can't do everything, right? And so which ones are the ones we go after first, and as God brings resources, we'll address the other ones and go after them. So, but the other part of that answer is, I've never been more accepted with addicts. They never asked, and they never cared that I was a diverse pastor. They just cared that I love them today. They just cared when I walk with them today. That's what they cared about. Will you help me today? And I said, yeah, I'll help you today. And so for the last 4 years, every day, it's just been like that. And some days are really sad because someone died. Because we would say we didn't help them enough, but we would also recognize they did make a choice, so we don't really save people, but we try to help them. We try to walk with them in life, give them the support that they need. So some days are very sad. There's no middle ground at the ranch. There's either great success stories, yeah, that person graduated and they were living under a bridge 9 months ago, or there's some sad parts too. So I don't know what that looks like. I know there was a program here. There's not every ministry is a program. Sometimes it's an attitude. But we're just not going to leave anybody on the outside, no matter how they got there. We're just going to try our best to live out this gospel message of Christ died for us and he loves us. And until the day he calls us home, he wants us to share that truth with other people. And usually it's with our lifestyle, and sometimes it's with our lips.
Amen. I mean, every culture has its, there were the tax collectors. They were the people on the outside, right? Despised. Every culture has them. Looks a little different in every place. So thank you for that, Chico. All right, Joanne.
What I heard in that when you were talking was the reason that God died, when Jesus died, that it was for love and a true love, a forgiving, true forgiving love, and that true forgiveness, that if we could all, and me included, that if we could all just forgive one another. And that's what's so hard for all of us to do. We're like these sweet Christians, these sweet people that, we want to go around and be nice to everybody. But it's like you were saying, you know. Someone comes into church and they raise their hand and they're not dressed just right. We look at them like they're weird. And I've thought of many times. It's like if they come into church, even I do it. It's like there's an uncomfortableness. If someone came in a wheelchair, they don't belong here, they belong someplace else. Like they belong in some other church. And that's the, I don't know what to call it. But God doesn't love it. I mean, He doesn't love us for being with Him. He wants us to have that love.
And sometimes I'll describe it this way is, I really think we're all a bunch of beggars looking for bread. Some of us just know the name of the bread maker, where it is. And if you know the name of the bread maker, where it lives, what's your job? It's to help the other beggars find bread. However you do that, and we all have different talents and abilities and contribute to that process differently. Some of you are extroverts and sharing life with other people comes very natural. Some are introverts, and that is a challenge. And some have more resources and are givers, and some give the nickels that they can afford to give. And we all contribute differently. But at the end of the day, none of us deserve His love. I shared some illustrations of, the things I've done wrong in my life, and I don't deserve His love. I'm grateful for it. That at some point somebody shared with me the name of the bread maker. And my life was so broken, I said, I need to get that bread. There's a lot of people that don't understand that their life is that broken or that they need bread. And last time I checked, nobody likes bread shoved in their face. So we love them until they're ready. We just keep loving them. We don't stop loving. We just keep loving them until they're ready, until God breaks their heart, warms their heart, whatever way we want to describe that process for them. We just keep loving them. And especially in a small town, we just keep loving them. Just keep loving the people at the hardware store where they know Jesus. Just keep loving them, keep inviting them, keep caring for them. Because I know that you do know that that's the one thing we do better here on earth than we're going to do in heaven. Loving sinners. And we're just all going to have to do that differently. I don't, every church has warts. Every person has a few. And every community has needs. So there's no perfect church, there's no perfect person. And if you think there's a perfect church, you don't join it because you'll mess it up. Okay? So but what we do with our imperfections and how we love each other through them, the world is watching. And as a church, if we can't love each other through that, then why would we come? Why would we come? And so that's a challenge for every community to do better. And Jennie and I have been through some stuff in life. And we limp a little bit. And we have some bruises. And I think in the kind of pastor that we would find in you is one who would be understanding and say, I get it. I get it. But God has also called us to move forward to it. Okay? Our hurts in life are there to teach us. Every trial is there to shape us, to form us. And I would not wish divorce on my son. I don't know that today I would say I'm grateful for it because it's wrong. Divorce is wrong. And it changed me. It changed me. I'm far more empathetic. I don't know that I could be a grown-up grandson had I not gone through the divorce, frankly. It changed the way I look at the world. And so, okay, God makes us a promise, right? He says, I will take all things and I will work together for good. To those who love me, to those who are called according to my purpose. He does not say all things are good. He just simply promises, no matter what happens, I will make good out of it if you love me. So I said, okay. And I believe he can do that through each of you, whatever those scars are, whatever causes that brokenness, he can do that. We just have to let him. And collectively, as a community, church, we have to let it happen in our church. And in a bigger collective, let that then emanate out into the community. That's what I want. Be a part of a place that does that. I just don't know all the hows to yet.
All right, let's, you got, looks like Eric has one for us.
This is from Craig again. Back to the call, feeling the call to plane. So during this process, has there been one or more experiences that you might share when it was obvious to you that the Spirit was opening or closing doors and continuing to call you to this specific church?
Sure. Just like Plain had 67 applications, I haven't put in quite that many, but we have candidated in other churches over this last year, put in applications in a few places, and been in the final group a couple times. So has God demonstrated leading? Yeah, by closing some doors, he does that. Some opportunities, and I thought, oh, this would be perfect. No, I don't want you to keep going. Okay. You know, there's all right, God, where do you want us? And so the process of planning has just continued. My earlier comments, the process sometimes clarifies the call. That first Zoom interview, I still see 3 screens, and I remember people's names, but oh, you sat in the lower right screen. And you were right. So because, and then there was a second interview, and they were all in the same place.
Good sit in the same seats.
Yeah, so that was helpful.
You were good church goers?
Yeah, so I don't know what I was going to
I just hijacked that one, sorry.
Yeah.
The little windows.
The
Yeah.
interviews, yeah.
So those interviews, I think what's really important is I shared a little bit of my pain of being asked to step down from a church from circumstances that didn't involve immorality or appropriateness, that I didn't do anything wrong with the money of the church. And those questions I was asked, and I don't mind people asking me those questions. That you deserve to know that your pastor had integrity. And so literally I'm in Costco and somebody asks, well, I heard you had an affair. I'm like, this is the pasta aisle. That's not the question you ask in the pasta aisle at Costco. But he wanted to know. You deserve the right to know. Did my pastor do that? No, I didn't do that. But so it's having those interviews, even through Zoom, I began to feel like, and I told my mentor before I came up here this weekend, I said, I have this thought that as much as I might have to give to you all as a church, you know, if you call me, I'll give you everything I got. And that's just who I am. My wife will tell me when it needs to stop and when we need to be home, and everything else will be yours. But I also felt like you do the same. And that's important to me. One, because Jenny's never formally filled that role as a pastor's wife. And so to have her be in a community of folks that are just going to love her, not kind of go through her to get to me, and you know, just to love her for who she is and the gifts that she has, and the gifts of hospitality and people gifts that she has. She's so good at those things. Through that process, it became clear that Plain is that kind of place. I think so. And so that made it a whole lot easier to say, it's not that I don't care about snow, I'll learn to do that. For me, it cared far more about being with the right people. The rest of life circumstances, a lot of people have just didn't plan. I guess I can do that too. It's just going to take me a little bit. I think Mike asked me, do you fish? And I said, I've never gutted a fish in my life. He said, we'll teach you. I said, okay. I'll just learn some things, So yeah, there's some things I would have to learn in the community, and that's okay. Other people have learned those things, but the process just warmed my heart to you through the leadership and to the folks around the committee. And so those were important realities of why Plain, why now, and how did we know that God has called us this way. Part of it too, I think I mentioned earlier, I needed to let go of some things of what I thought would be the next step for the ministry, because God just wasn't doing that. No matter how I've served in the past, and God began to show me over time, I'm just going to use you a little differently in this next season. And you're going to learn as much as I use you. You're going to learn some things. And I said, okay.
Awesome, great. Out here, Sydney's got one, and then we'll hit Sarah Strickland up here.
Well, you mentioned studying missiology, is that how you put it? And our church will celebrate 80 years this coming December, and missions has always been a huge part of who we are as a church. And so, I just wonder, missiology, what does that look like to you as far as missions and how you would like to see that?
Sure. Missiology is the course of study that trains someone to be a missionary, to take that gospel into another culture. That's really what it is as a course of study. But more practically speaking, for a church, I wouldn't want to be part of a community that wasn't trying to have eyeballs out. And by that I mean the natural, if church is left unchecked, if we don't watch ourselves, what do we all gravitate to? We nickname it sometimes in ministry the holy huddle, right? Because that's the most comfortable for us. We like our small group of people, we like our friendship group, we like the way it is. And again, if I introduce somebody new into that, what happens? Well, it's uncomfortable because now it's different. And so all churches, not just Plain, all churches do this. The natural gravitation in human nature is towards the holy huddle. And so you constantly, in creative ways, have to keep eyeballs out. How are we going to do that? So eyeballs out into our community. Let's do something that's not just the benefit of us as a church. And you do a lot of things already like that. The pantry is illustrated with that. All of you are involved in different, some of you are giving your time to ski patrol and training kids, and that's so wonderful because we're out in the community, and that's so important. Missions is just a further extension of that. The Lord gave us command that we should be the church of Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and those parts of the earth. Jerusalem is the people that are like us. Judea is the people that are kind of like us. There's the people that are really different than us. And the uttermost parts of the earth are the people we don't even know about. Right? It's not that Plain has to give millions of dollars to those things. They have to find an expression. How do we be a part of what God is doing in places outside of us? So in our community and the uttermost parts of the earth, and to collectively as a church, we just have to figure out what's the healthy expression of that outreach, right? So how do we get people involved in that? How do we give our church resources towards that? We commit to that because if we get a certain amount of church resources over here, we don't have them for this over here. And that's okay. We just have to understand that process. We're committed to that. And so we committed so the gospel can get new places. And even from this little church in this little town, that we could be committed to that process. So that was an integral part of me just listening and learning about that, to walk into a church and see a board that said we care about the world. To have people who are a part of the leadership to say, yeah, we're actively involved in that. And here's our current expression of what it means to have eyeballs out. Sometimes I like to say things simply, not because I haven't thought about them, but because I want you to remember them. That's easy to remember, right? What does God want from us? Eyeballs out. Right? Eyeballs out. Okay, well, what does that look like? Then we got to wrestle with the how question, right? But he wants us to have eyeballs out. It's the one thing we do better on earth is have eyeballs out. So the day he calls us home. So what's Clayton's job? I'm not too sure. We talked a little bit at lunch about missions and what we're doing. And great. Great. I don't know that I would, again, change 6 things about that. I just want to understand what the church is doing too. Does that help?
Yeah, that get at the essence of your question, Cindy. All right, Sarah.
So amidst the ups and downs and stresses and joys and just day-to-day ministry, how do each of you find rest and rejuvenation?
Hot tub.
Every remark.
When I'm, my wife will know when I'm not in a really good place. There'll be more ice cream in the freezer. And I'm only joking a little bit when I say that. So yeah, it's a wonderful question. And it's one that I wrestled with deeply in that, because I would potentially live right there. And that's a new reality. I've been a pastor for 28 years, but I've never lived on site where Bob can come over whenever the trigger gets turned on, it's threat to do that already. So we'll have to work through that. We'll have to just figure out, what are those patterns. But pastoring is not a 9-to-5 kind of deal. So you have to find ways. I do try to have a Sabbath expression, a day where I shut it down, and unless it really is an emergency. I try to make sure that my calendar has boundaries. Illustrating with this might be, I will remember getting a call from a family in the church and the marriage was in trouble. And said, can you meet with us? And I said, sure, where would you like to meet? And they said, can you meet tonight? And I said, no. Well, why? They asked. And you know what I said? I have a previous commitment. You want to know what it was? I was taking my son to a pottery camp. And the truth was their marriage had been bad for a long time. That was the first time they asked for help. So I absolutely made that appointment, but I wasn't going to blow up the commitment I had made to my son to do that. That was important too. And their marriage, it wasn't a danger. Nobody was at risk. That was something that we could get to. So having good boundaries, having a Sabbath. Jennie and I love to paddleboard and do those kinds of things together. This area obviously allows for that kind of getaway and activity. I don't have to drive miles and miles and miles away to do that here. It's right in the backyard. So I would have to find new expressions of that, new ways to explore that. I remodeled the house, and it was really therapy for me. I told God, I'll buy this house and remodel it if you just rebuild my life. And so that's what 3.5 years of process was. Jennie came in the middle of that process, and so we then tackled that together, and she would come over and we'd be tearing apart a house. And so finding Sabbath, finding good boundaries and activities that don't have to do with the church, so that my brain disengages and that my body gets moving, because pastors can be very sedentary. So those things are really important for me.
Rest and rejuvenation.
I think like you said before, paddleboarding is a big thing for us. I do like to walk and I do, you know, love my pet. So I think something like that. I do go get my nails done. It sounds silly, but just to get my nails painted or just to have just some time alone with maybe my current Audible book. Those are good downtimes for me. But yeah, I think I'm a little easier at it than he is, because he's always had a lot more on his plate than I do. So that would be kind of my answer to that.
One thing, we kind of talked through that process, because what do you need right now? Sometimes it's really simple, right? Can we just watch a little bit of that television? Because what is TV in its essence, right? It's just a simple disengaging. And so we have a couple shows that we really like, the crime shows, and we really like the medical shows. And those are just times, those are simple, just disengaging kind of times. And then we try to make sure that we do date night, so that we're re-engaging in us. We have a commitment to each other. We're home at dinner every night, unless it's been prearranged that we're home at a certain time and dinner's there. We're together at that moment. And we, in the past, have had a Saturday morning time where the calendars are just opened up and there's coffee. And we just talk through the practical, what's your week going to be like this week? Because ministry isn't normal, right? Yeah, there's some normal meetings and church happens every Sunday, but there's a lot of ebb and flow to it. And so for her to know when it's going to be a push and pull time for me helps us as a couple. And for her to know, oh, even though Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday are going to be really heavy, Friday is going to be a time where we can reconnect and get back together. So for that to be just talked through and not assumed and find out is a really important part of the process for us. Because even though I wouldn't say my job at the ranch, my title is executive director, there's still a lot of that push and pull. And so, and she sometimes plugs into that, but for her to know, okay, this is going to be a busy week for you because we have a camp of 1,000 men. Yeah, I gotta be there. I know something's going to go wrong. Someone's going to blow out a knee, because when you get that many guys together, something bad happens. So just need to be there. So yeah, so talking through those things, setting aside time for that. And I'll have to learn to do that a little bit differently, and being so close. But my commute is not that bad, so that would be a good thing.
Make the workday a little more efficient, I guess, in some ways. Thank you, Sarah, for your question. I think, we have time, for maybe one or two more. Go ahead.
This question is for Jennie. Jennie, I'm curious about what your experiences have been in involvement in your churches in the past, and knowing that this pastoral wife role is going to be really different for you. But what are some of the areas that you have really loved as far as church involvement in the past?
Yeah, that's a great question. Church involvement for me has been centered around women's Bible study, participated in that, and just being in a life group, which would be a growth group. A lot of churches have different tag names for it, and that could be a reflection weekly on the sermon-based programs, or even just different studies that have gone through. Been in a constant life group for 13 years. Had a couple seasons where I stepped out due to stuff that had gone on, but we are currently actually in that group as well now. Find a lot of fulfillment in that with other ladies and as couples as well. As a pastor's wife role, I think I will look to him for much guidance and trust. I don't know what that's going to feel like. I do have a suspicion of what it'll look like, because we've had lots of long, deep conversations about what it's like being a pastor's wife. And so there'll be some trial and error.
I'm probably gonna say the wrong thing. I mean, I'm gonna make a mistake, I know, but, I just really look forward to getting to know, you ladies in the church, and, just as people in a whole, and just doing life with you. I found that doing life in a life group is where I felt closest in my church. It wasn't sitting in a pew or a chair on Sunday or Saturday night. It was sitting in a circle in someone's home, doing life with them. And it could be the meal we shared before we have our Bible study time. It could be the dessert afterwards before we walk out the door. Just those conversations tend to be deep, and they tend to be so very fulfilling for each other. And I do enjoy that part about church, and that feels like a community to me. And you all feel like a community. And so I look forward to that experience. Does that answer your question a bit? Yeah. Do you want to answer?
Jenny's gifts are in the areas of hospitality and service, and so those finds unique ways to express that. Our house is a home. Those aren't the same word. And it takes work for a house to be a home. And she always appreciates when I tell her I'm bringing someone home. And does a great job to make our house a home. So that's been just really fun to watch her head ministry that way. Jennie will have people over every night of the week because she's energized by just being with people, meeting people. And as much as I love people, sometimes my brain just needs to not have people around. So we figure out that balance of, okay, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday is too much. So maybe two, but at least one. So we worked through that in 2.5 years of marriage and found that balance of, okay, and then we'll have one planned, and then one of the parents will call. I can't say the parents. So, okay, so it's going to be 2 times we'll have people over this week. So we just worked that out. But she is incredible making our house and does various service projects in the church. So the church is doing something, and she's the one that remembers at Costco, oh, by the way, we have a toy drive, and we need to buy this, this, and this for the toy. She's the one that remembers those things. So she's really good at that.
Awesome. Okay, anyone else have questions? Kathy?
I already heard this answer kind of at lunchtime, but how do you make it fun for kids at church?
I'll answer it from the principle side rather than the factual outside. But we talked a little bit. I think there's some fundamental things that every healthy church must do. It has to be about the truth. It has to be preached. It has to make every effort to live it out. And so we must do that. Second thing we talked about, you got to have eyeballs out. A healthy church always has eyeballs out. As much as the truth helps speak to people that are in the church and we're doing life together, and sermons and small groups. And so that's our eyeballs in, we're growing together. But then we make a concerted effort to have eyeballs out. That's a healthy church. I don't know the house here. I would be wrong to guess all of it, but gotta do that. I think there's a fruit that a healthy church does and invests in the future. A very small part of that is buildings. Generally, people like to meet in buildings, right? You've experienced that in the pandemic. It's funny how we're wired, right? We like the comforts of home. But investing in the future needs children and youth. And a healthy church finds a way to do that. And teaching the word, eyeballs out, investing in the future, everything else comes afterwards. We got to figure out a way to do those because 2 weeks ago, when we were here, there was a crossing guard down at the store. We sat there for, I don't know, 10 minutes. And they just kept coming. You know, in the skis, and they were different heights, and they just kept walking across the street, you know. And if it was California, people would have been honking, but you were the fool. If you were by this road at this time of day, everybody knows this is when they cross. Okay? So, but I know this about children's and youth. I got saved in college, right? So that I didn't know what Jesus looked like in children's and youth. But I quickly learned as a pastor that a healthy church must do these things. And the number one question that people always ask their kids when they come to church is, was it fun? Because parents know if their kids didn't have fun, they don't want to go back. And so how it's fun, I'm not exactly sure, but I do know it must be. And as much as we must be committed to teaching the truth, having fun without the truth, ultimately, you know, that's not going to grow people. That's like having candy for dinner. It's not going to be helpful in the long run. But we can't be afraid as a church to not have fun together. It got to be a place when the church got big enough. The church I pastored was Mission House Church, and I would actually now play the opposite role that you might think. I would tell my youth pastors, a middle school pastor, and a high school pastor, if you don't break something at this event, then it's not going to be fun. Because the church got to be a size, they were so worried of doing something wrong. I realized I got to release them from this. Now, we're not talking about people's legs or toes or things like that. Keep people safe, right? But I as a pastor, needed to communicate with my younger staff. It's okay to have fun. And it's okay to do things that students would want to be a part of. And I don't expect the older people in the church to know the value of that. But you intuitively know as a pastor that friends aren't going to, young people aren't going to invite their friends unless they know their friends will have fun. So if fun means having donuts, if fun means having pizza, if fun means playing games, there must also be truth. Because we can't have candy for dinner every night. We can have some sweets once in a while. But if we serve candy for dinner every night, our bodies will shut down. There must be a good meal. There must be a balance. That's the truth of God's word. So we must present that in age appropriate ways. But it must be fun. And we just have to figure out what that looks like. And I don't know the specifics of that just yet, but I would be committed to that process of discovering how we do that well and how we do that in such a way. It's okay that we can be known as the church that has fun. Because people want to be a part of that. You know? And then when they come, they realize, it's just a bunch of normal people enjoying God together. They're not as crotchety as we thought. They're not as stuck on themselves as we thought. And it's okay if we have tattoos and if our hair's not in place. And yeah, we're just that kind of place. And so, yeah, that's a little bigger answer, but yeah, fun is important. And every children's ministry, wherever we find a way to do that. So we gotta have fun at some point. If they keep coming, guess what they hear when they keep coming? Jesus. It's up to Jesus to change their heart, not us. But if they keep coming, they're going to keep hearing about Jesus. That's what we're committed to, right? That's the core. And so we just keep, the more people hear about Jesus, the more. And so when they're having fun, they keep hearing about Jesus. And that's a fun process to watch. And you win the children, and then also, what do the children bring with them to church? Parents, right? And all of a sudden, parents sit in the back, and you see them, right? You know them. It's like, we don't know what that is. But he keeps coming because a kid is coming into youth group. He doesn't know what this cult is all about. And so he wants to check it out. And all of a sudden, Jesus gets up in his heart. And so that's a fun process.
Awesome. Good stuff. Well, some of you have heard me say it before. I'll say it again. Thanksgiving isn't just a holiday in November. It really should change your life. Thanksgiving should change your life. And I'm thankful. I'm really thankful for this time that we've had. Thank you guys for sharing, and I'm thankful. I'm not going to have a mic tomorrow, so again, thank you for being invested in this process. Thank you for praying over it. Thank you for your great patience. It really is a gift to us. So I'm thankful for each and every one of you coming. Thank you for those on Zoom that were here or still are. Yep. So I'm grateful for this time. And Chico and Jennie came in yesterday, midday-ish, afternoon, I think, back to flying.
Well, we were on the 206 side at about 9:15 yesterday morning, and we met Zachary for breakfast, and then Eric came by and shuttled us over here, and so we got here
About 3
o'clock or so.
Yeah, so, and then today I've been meeting with folks and then here, and then they will be here with us at church tomorrow, Sunday school at 9, just hanging out and participating, and then 10:30, an active part of the service, preaching. So you can expect that, and look forward to having everyone here for that time. And we're grateful to have them back visiting again. And again, we look forward to our vote, which is officially will be after church on Sunday the 28th, is when that'll take place. So this is all kind of a lead up to that, but we're excited to have you guys here for the weekend. Eric, we pray for us, and then I think we will be dismissed. And
Great. Father, thank you for this time. Thank you for your activity in our lives. And this is all part of our journey. And so, Father, thank you for your ways, your will. And we do ask for that as we move forward. Father, thank you for your great love for us, that we are here because we love you back, because you loved us first. And so I'm just excited to see how you're going to be moving and building us into a body that loves well, both each other and the community. And so thanks, God, for this time. Thank you for Chico and Jennie, and just pray blessing on their the rest of their time here, and our body as well. And we pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen.